hadn't heard my sister's voice in 15 years. Not a birthday card, not a text, not even a whisper when our mother passed away. But the moment the news broke that I had inherited our Aunt Clara's legendary jewellery collection, my phone rang before the funeral dirt had even settled. My name is Martha, and I'm about to show my sister that some debts can't be paid in gold. The tea in my cup had gone cold, but I didn't mind. I sat in Aunt Clara's sun-drenched parlour, surrounded by the scent of old lavender and expensive perfume. Clara had been the rebel of the family, a woman who travelled the world and collected jewels that could buy a small island, and for some reason, she had left it all to me. Suddenly, the heavy oak front door swung open without a knock. Martha! Oh, my poor sweet sister! I didn't even have to look up to know who it was. Lydia. She swept into the room like a whirlwind of silk and fake sympathy. She looked exactly the same as she did 15 years ago, just with more Botox and a more expensive haircut. Lydia, I said, my voice flat. You're late for the funeral. By about 3 days. I know. I was in Zurich when I heard the news. I was devastated. Truly, she said, dabbing a dry eye with a lace handkerchief. She didn't sit next to me. Instead, her eyes immediately began darting around the room, landing on the small velvet boxes stacked on the sideboard. Clara was so dear to me. It's only right that we handle her legacy together. Before we dive deeper into how I plan to expose my sister's greed, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss the moment Lydia realizes she's walked into a trap she can't escape. Now back to the story. I took a slow sip of my cold tea. Handle? There's nothing to handle, Lydia. The will was very specific. Clara left the collection to the one person who actually answered her letters. Lydia's face stiffened for a microsecond before the mask of sisterly love slid back into place. Martha, don't be like that. We're blood. You've always been the sensible one, the quiet one. But these jewels, they're high maintenance. They need security, insurance, proper storage. Things you aren't used to. I looked at my sister. To her, I was still the boring Martha who stayed behind in our hometown while she was the glamorous socialite. She thought I was a simple woman who would be overwhelmed by a few diamonds. You're right, Lydia, I said, a small, cold smile forming on my lips. It is a lot of responsibility. I was actually thinking of selling the most famous piece, the Midnight Sapphire, just to cover the inheritance tax. Lydia's breath hitched. I knew that sapphire was the only thing she had ever wanted. She had talked about it since we were teenagers. Sell it? To a stranger? Lydia gasped, leaning in close. No, Martha. Don't do anything rash. Why don't I stay here for a few days? We can go through the pieces together. I can help you value them. After all, what are sisters for? I looked into her greedy eyes and saw 15 years of silence, 15 years of neglect, and 15 years of being forgotten. She didn't want a sister. She wanted a gemstone. Fine, Lydia, I whispered. Stay. Let's see exactly what Aunt Clara's legacy is worth. As Lydia hurried upstairs to pick the best guest room, I pulled a small tarnished key from my pocket. Lydia thought she was here for a payday. She didn't know that Aunt Clara's real legacy wasn't just in the boxes. It was in the letters Clara had kept for decades. Letters that Lydia had sent to Clara, begging her to leave me out of the will entirely. The game was on, and Lydia had no idea that the quiet sister had been taking notes for 15 years. Lydia didn't waste a second. By the next morning, she had transformed Aunt Clara's dining table into a valuation station. She had her jeweller's loop, a velvet cloth, and a notebook ready. She was acting like a professional appraiser, but her hands were shaking with pure, unadulterated greed. Martha, darling, she sang as I walked into the room, I've started cataloguing the smaller pieces. These emerald earrings are exquisite, but really, they're old-fashioned. They won't fetch much in today's market. You should probably just let me take them off your hands, as a keepsake, of course. I sat down, watching her thin fingers claw at a diamond brooch. A keepsake, Lydia. I thought you were here to help me value them, not to build your own collection. Lydia laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. Oh, don't be silly. I'm just trying to simplify your life. You've always lived such a quiet life. You wouldn't know where to even begin selling these. People would cheat you, Martha. But me? I know the elite. I know the auction houses. I leaned back, watching her. You're right. I don't know the elite, but Aunt Clara did. She told me that jewellery is like people. The most beautiful ones often have the darkest flaws. Lydia froze for a second, her eyes narrowing. What is that supposed to mean? Nothing, I whispered. By the way, I found the key to the heavy safe in the basement. The Midnight Sapphire is in there. I was going to open it tonight, but I'm feeling a bit tired. Maybe tomorrow. I saw the hunger in Lydia's eyes flare up. It was almost pathetic. She had ignored me for 15 years, skipped our mother's funeral and forgotten my existence. But for a blue stone, she was willing to sit here and play loving sister for as long as it took. Tomorrow? But Martha, the insurance agent might need to see it sooner, Lydia argued, her voice rising an octave. We should check it tonight, just to make sure the setting hasn't rusted. Tonight is for memories, Lydia, I said firmly, standing up. I'm going to spend the evening reading Aunt Clara's old journals. She kept everything, you know, every letter, every bill, every betrayal. The colour drained from Lydia's face. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She knew exactly what was in those journals. I walked toward the hallway, but stopped and turned back. Oh, I almost forgot. Since you're staying here, I've decided to host a small dinner party on Friday. Just a few old family friends, and a lawyer. I thought it would be the perfect time to announce what I'm doing with the collection. Announce? What are you talking about? Lydia snapped, her mask finally starting to slip. You'll see, I said, my voice as calm as a graveyard. It's going to be a night to remember. After all, the best way to honour Aunt Clara's legacy is to tell the truth about why she left it to me, and not to you. As I climbed the stairs, I could hear Lydia frantically dialing a number on her phone. She was panicked. She thought she was here to rob a simple woman. She didn't realise she was the main course at a dinner party. She wouldn't survive. I went into my room and locked the door. I didn't need to read the journals. I already knew them by heart. I picked up the Midnight Sapphire, the real one, which I had moved to my bedside drawer weeks ago. The safe in the basement? That was filled with something else entirely. The dining room was glowing under the warmth of Aunt Clara's vintage chandelier. I had invited 4 of the oldest family friends, people who had watched Lydia and me grow up, and people who knew exactly how Lydia had vanished the moment things got difficult. Lydia was in her element, wearing a cocktail dress that cost more than my car, draped in Aunt Clara's smaller diamonds that she had borrowed for the evening. She was charming the guests, playing the role of the devoted sister who had rushed across continents to be by my side. It's been such a whirlwind, Lydia sighed, sipping her wine. But family is everything. I told Martha, I don't care about the jewels, I just want to make sure you're not alone in this big house. I sat at the head of the table, watching her performance with a silent intensity. That's so kind of you, Lydia. Especially considering you didn't even have my phone number until the lawyer called you. The table went quiet. Lydia's laugh was brittle. Oh, Martha, you know how terrible I am with technology. I lost my old contacts. Is that why you lost Aunt Clara's contact too? I asked, setting my glass down, because she kept every single letter you sent her, including the ones where you told her I was mentally unstable and unfit to manage any inheritance out. Lydia's face turned a ghostly shade of white. The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Martha, this is hardly the time or place. Actually, it's the perfect time, I interrupted, standing up, because tonight I'm making the announcement I promised. I've decided that the Midnight Sapphire and the rest of the collection shouldn't belong to just one person. They represent a legacy of truth. I signalled to the waiter, who was actually a legal clerk I'd hired for the night. He brought out a velvet tray, but it didn't hold the sapphire. It held a stack of photocopied letters. These are copies of the letters Lydia sent to Clara over the last 15 years, I said, handing them to the guests. While I was changing our mother's bandages and sitting by her bed as she breathed her last, Lydia was busy writing to our aunt, trying to convince her to cut me out of the will so she could fund her lifestyle in Zurich. Lydia stood up, her chair screeching against the floor. You're lying. These are forgeries. Are they? I looked at her. Because the handwriting matches the signature on the guest book you just signed upstairs. And since you were so eager to see the Midnight Sapphire, why don't we go to the basement safe right now? Let's open it in front of everyone." Lydia was trapped. If she refused, she looked guilty. If she went, she thought she was finally getting her hands on the prize. Greed won. "Fine, let's open it. Let's see your proof." We walked down to the cold, stone-walled basement. The air was thick with tension. Lydia's eyes were locked on the heavy iron safe in the corner. Her breath was shallow, her fingers clawing at her silk clutch. "Open it, Martha," she hissed. "Show them the stone." I stepped back and handed her the key. "No, Lydia. You've wanted this for 15 years. You open it." Lydia grabbed the key so hard she nearly drew blood. She shoved it into the lock, turned it, and threw the heavy door open. But there was no blue glint, no sparkle of diamonds. The safe was filled with hundreds of thousands of loose white feathers that came billowing out like a snowstorm, covering Lydia's expensive dress and her perfectly styled hair. And at the bottom of the safe sat a single framed photograph, a picture of our mother, alone in her hospital room, holding a birthday card I had made for her. "Where is it?" Lydia screamed, frantically digging through the feathers. "Where is the sapphire?" "The sapphire is safe, Lydia," I said, my voice echoing in the cold basement. "But you just showed everyone in this room exactly what you came here for. You didn't even look at the photo of our mother. You didn't even blink. You just wanted the rock." The guests looked at Lydia, covered in feathers, looking like a crazed bird, and then at the photo of the mother she had abandoned. The silence was deafening. Lydia looked up, her eyes burning with rage. "You think you've won? You think this little stunt matters? I'm your sister. I'll sue you for every penny." "You can try," I whispered. "But the lawyer sitting at the dinner table upstairs just watched you attempt to break into a safe that I've already legally declared as empty in my tax filings. You just committed a very public act of attempted theft." The basement was dead silent, except for Lydia's ragged breathing. She stood there, covered in white feathers, looking like a shattered ornament. The family friends I had invited were already heading upstairs, their faces filled with disgust. They had seen enough. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" Lydia hissed, shaking the feathers off her silk sleeves. "You trapped me. You humiliated me in front of everyone." "I didn't trap you, Lydia," I said, walking slowly toward her. "I just opened the door and watched you walk into your own greed. You had 15 years to call me. You had 15 years to ask how I was. But you only showed up for a stone." I reached into the pocket of my cardigan and pulled out a small blue velvet pouch. I opened it, and the Midnight Sapphire caught the dim light of the basement, glowing with a deep, hypnotic fire. Lydia's eyes widened. Her breath hitched. Even now, after everything, she couldn't look away. "There it is," I whispered. "The thing you'd sell your soul for. Aunt Clara told me in her last letter that this sapphire is called the heart's mirror. She said it shows you exactly what you value most." "Give it to me, Martha," Lydia pleaded, her voice cracking. "We can settle this. I'll leave. I'll never come back. Just give me my share." "Your share," I laughed, a cold, dry sound. "Lydia, you've already spent your share. You spent it in the years you weren't there. You spent it every time I had to lift our mother alone. You spent it every time I cried in an empty house while you were at galas in Zurich." I walked past her, heading toward the stairs. "The sapphire has been sold, Lydia. I signed the papers this morning." Lydia froze. "Sold? To whom? For how much?" "I sold it to a private museum under one condition," I said, turning back to look at her from the stairs. "It will be part of an exhibit called The Cost of Silence. And the money? Every single cent has been donated to the hospice where our mother spent her final days. They're naming a new wing after her. A wing for people who have no family to sit with them." Lydia slumped against the cold stone wall, her face twisting in a mix of rage and defeat. She was penniless, disgraced, and now, the prize she had hunted was gone forever. "Get out of my house, Lydia," I said, my voice steady and final. "The guest room is locked. Your bags are already on the porch. If you ever contact me again, I'll release the original letters, the ones where you mocked our mother's illness, to every social circle you belong to." Lydia didn't say a word. She stumbled out of the basement, out of the front door, and into the dark night, a woman who had everything but possessed nothing. I walked back into the parlour and sat in Aunt Clara's chair. The house felt lighter, the air felt cleaner. I looked at the photograph of my mother I had taken from the safe. "It's done, Mom," I whispered. I wasn't the quiet sister anymore. I was a woman who had reclaimed her life, her house, and her peace. The jewellery was gone, but for the first time in 60 years, I felt like I was wearing a crown. I picked up my tea, this time it was hot, and watched the moon rise through the window. Aunt Clara was right. Some debts can't be paid in gold. They can only be paid in truth.